What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode number 16 of Pengine Chats. My name is Carrie, and today we're going to talk about what is a dry ink versus a wet ink or anything like that. But the primary question that I get a lot is, hey, this person said this ink is really dry. What does that mean? Well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know like down to the molecular level what makes a dry ink, what makes a wet ink. But from a usability standpoint, so like, you know, what you'll notice using your fountain pen is a dry ink is just that. It's going to come out of the pen maybe a little bit slower. It's going to make the pen feel like it's not putting down much ink, so it might make it feel a little bit scratchy. Not necessarily scratchy, but a little bit more toothy, kind of more like you're writing with a pencil. Whereas like a very wet ink is going to lubricate the end of the nib very well, so that your nib just writes like no business, like just glides across the paper. And the downside to a drier ink, or one that is not quite as liquidy as its counterpart, is that if you use it with a drier writing pen, so one where, like, you know, the capillary action of the ink down to the nib isn't as good, either the tines are like really tight or the feed just doesn't keep up quite. If you use a dry ink in a dry writing pen, your experience is not going to be very nice. It'll probably write just fine for the first couple lines or so when that feed is saturated in the ink, but after that you're going to notice a pretty significant difference with the color of your ink and even with your writing experience. So like one of my favorite inks is J.Herbin L'Eau. That is quite famously a drier writing ink. So it basically needs to be used in a wet writing pen. So I like to use it in a Visconti or my Pilot Custom 823, pens that really put down a lot of ink. So that way it negates a little bit of that dryness from the actual ink, and I get all of the benefits with very little of the drawback. Wet writing inks are the polar opposite, so they're ones that you could put in a drier writing pen. So for the most part, I know some of you have not had the same experience as I have, but for me, all of my TWSBI pens, with the exception of the Eco, are very dry writing pens. They do not put down very much ink. If I were to put J.Herbin L'Eau in there, it would be terrible. It's just not going to be a good experience. But if I put, you know, a wet writing ink, or one that like flows a lot better, essentially, then it takes that terrible experience and just makes it, you know, a little bit better. So definitely experiment. If you want to really try out a dry ink, one that you know is going to be dry, I'd recommend maybe picking up a sample either from like an online retailer the next time you place an order, or if you can go into a shop, of J.Herbin L'Eau. One, because it's a fantastic color, and two, because it is famously known as being a drier ink. And that way you can try it maybe in a couple different pens and just see how the flow of that ink really dictates the way that it looks. Because if you have it in like a drier writing pen, that color is going to be much more pale, much more yellow, than if you had it in a very wet ink, where it's going to be much more of a deep brown with a little bit of a yellow tone to it. So it's definitely worth checking out. But that's essentially the end result of a dry ink, is that you're not going to get the flow as well. Doesn't mean that they're bad, it just means you have to be a little bit more cognizant, and that's typically why a lot of people will buy samples before they buy a whole bottle. And in every review ever done of an ink, they'll tell you what the ink flow is like. And that's why, for, again, a lot of people who do it seriously, so you know, Brian Goulet, he's very famous for having his, you know, nib nook and all that kind of stuff. When he does his pen reviews, he does it with the exact same ink every time because he knows how that ink performs. So that way he's not getting any bias off of that ink, he's only getting the pen. So just things like that to keep in mind. But question for you guys is, what inks have you tried that have been very dry inks? Do you care if it's a dry ink or a wet ink? Do you really notice that big of a difference? Let me know in the comments down below. Hit that like button if you liked it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more like it every Monday and Friday, with occasional Q&A on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Guys, as always, I love you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.